I grew up in a military household, which meant that my family was always moving around. Some might find it very interesting because you get to see lots of new places and meet a ton of new people. But I, on the other hand, despised it. In the year 2013, I was in high school in Southern California, and I had recently moved to a city called Menifee, which is mainly a suburb for the working folk of Riverside County. This has been the first time my parents were finally able to buy a house of their own instead of living on military bases or renting a home. And being the new kids, especially in high school, I would have thought it would be very hard to make new friends, but I did in the first week. Their names were Bradley, Jacob, and Austin, and to this day I'm still very close to Bradley. They were our main group of friends, and I preferred to hang out with them when not in school, and I did so very frequently. Anyway, there's just one particular day that sticks out from the rest. I remember it being a Friday in that year's fall season. My trio of friends all happened to live in a cul-de-sac which was over a mile from where I lived. Since my neighbourhood consisted of mainly elderly people, I usually spent most of my time over at theirs. Frankly, I don't remember what we actually did that day. All I do remember was since it was a Friday, my mum allowed me to stay out a bit later. When the time reached about midnight, I got a text from my mom, and she told me to come home as she and my dad were going to go to sleep. I would have asked my friends if their parents could give me a ride home, but on the second thought they'd probably also be heading to bed, so I didn't want to bug them by asking if I could sleep over. So I gave my friends a farewell and I headed home. I honestly didn't mind walking. The air was nice and cool, and I always loved the night sky. Between mine and my friends' homes, there was an elementary school with a wide, green, flat park right next to it. The park at the time had no lights surrounding it, and it was totally pitch black with the exception of the corners, and this was where the lampposts were. As I was about to pass the park, I noticed a man sitting on a bench near one of the park corners about 100 feet away. When I got closer and was about to pass him up, I gave him a quick glance. I couldn't see his face because his head was facing down, but I could decipher that he was a bald Caucasian man wearing a black hoodie and shorts. Besides that, I didn't really pay much attention to him and continued on my way. I kept moving forward, occasionally glancing at my phone for no particular reason. Maybe just to pass the time. As I neared a lamppost, I noticed when glancing down that a second shadow had been cast alongside mine. Somebody was behind me. Maybe it was the guy from earlier. I quickened my pace while trying not to make it too obvious to get a distance between myself and whoever was behind me. Now, some people probably wouldn't mind or care if they had to share the sidewalk with a stranger, but since it was late at night, and because I'm a pretty skinny dude, I didn't want the risk of being mugged. Eventually, I decided to cross the street. I looked both ways for cars, but obviously it was to see who was behind me. And sure enough, it was the same man. It was a little brighter due to there being more streetlights, and I was able to get another look at him. He was built, and he was over 6 foot tall. After I crossed, I continued down my same route, but shortly after I noticed that the guy had also crossed the street and was once again right behind me. Okay, now I was starting to really freak out as my heart began to race and beat faster and faster. Up ahead, the street, which turned off the road and into my neighbourhood, was within sight. At first I felt relieved, but then I realised I didn't want the guy to follow me home and know where I lived. Instead of turning into my street, I continued walking forward until I approached another street coming off the main road. I quickly sped up and turned into the street, and once I knew I was a little out of sight, I began to jog away quickly, but quieting my footsteps. When I was like 100 yards away from the mouth of the street, I twisted my head around to clarify if the man had continued following me. He was, and not just following, he was full on sprinting. There was no way I could take him in a fight, and I had no idea if he was armed. At that moment, I decided, screw it, and also began to sprint away. I didn't even know where I was at that point, or which new street I'd be running into. All that mattered was getting away. After running for a while, I ended up thinking of an idea to run to the side of a house that had 2 trash bins next to it, and lying on my stomach behind them. I was flat on my belly. I was facing the street. Luckily for me, I had been wearing a black jacket, so I was hoping to be able to blend into the darkness around me. I laid there for like a minute when the guy happened to stop running on the sidewalk near where I was lying. He stood there and scanned the area around him really fast. My heart stopped when he faced in my general direction. When he couldn't see me, he cursed under his breath and continued running in the direction he had been previously heading. I waited there for about 5 minutes or so, just to be sure that he was long gone. Afterwards, I bolted straight home, and it still took half an hour to get there because I was unfamiliar with these neighbourhoods. My biggest fear was bumping into that man again. I never told my parents about the experience, since we had finally settled in and I had already made up my own group of friends and didn't want to risk moving again. My only precaution was to never walk home alone at that time ever again. The event itself slowly faded into my mind until recently, when I came across a story similar to mine on internet forums and internet posts. I never found out who that guy was, But in the years following, I discovered that in the early 2000s, the local high school had a neo-Nazi problem, but it had since been rooted out. I'm not positive that this is why he ran after me or not, but if he was trying to get money off me, it does seem possible that a white supremacist wouldn't mind roughening up a small Latino in the middle of the night when no one was around. So, to the Midnight Stalker, let's not meet again.